It is 8 p.m. here on the East Coast, which means it's time for us to blast off. Welcome, everyone, to the February National Call of American Promise, the monthly gathering of our network of Americans advancing the next U.S. constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics. We're all coming from different walks of life from across the country and across the political spectrum, united by our conviction that every American, regardless of their wealth, deserves a voice in our government. And we come together once a month to remember we are all part of this national network, to learn from one another and to reignite our passion in this work. A big thank you to everyone who is tuning in live or listening to the recording of this call. I was recently talking with a supporter in Denver who described the experience of telling her brothers-in-law about this amendment and being faced with the sentiment from all of them, that'll never happen. For those of us doing this work, it's a line we often face, and it's one that I am trying to actually find hope in. And I'm doing that by every time I hear this line, remembering and sharing in return the Nelson Mandela line, it always seems impossible until it's done. Writing and amending the Constitution is how Americans have formed a more perfect union throughout our country's history. Many of the things we consider fundamentally American didn't exist at our country's outset. For instance, the right for people of color to have voice, for women to have voice, for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds serving in the military to have voice. But their right to voice was won when a Supreme Court ruling so ignited people that they demanded amendments to change things, amendments that were impossible until they were done. So again, to all of you on this call, wisely ignoring the cries of impossible and working toward done, thank you. Tonight, we are going to review how our work since February's call is stacking up nationally, and we'll work together to get ready for this month's suggested action by learning from Ashwari Solo Hub in Santa Fe, New Mexico, about how she's found success getting elected officials and candidates to sign the American Promise Pledge. And we will be especially prepared to have those discussions, especially thoughtful and questioning discussions with our elected officials after hearing from our guest speaker, Professor Chara Torres-Bellasy. And here to introduce Professor Torres-Bellasy is our very own Jeff Clement. And with that, Jeff, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Kimberly, for that inspiring opening. And thank you, Chara. Professor Torres-Bellasy is here with us, and we couldn't be more honored. She is one of the superstars in the law professor world. I would say, without a doubt, one of the leading law professors of her generation, and knows more about the subject of what led to this amendment and what the constitutional issues underlying campaign finance, corporate law, Citizens United, and democracy. Let me tell you a little bit about her and then turn it over to the professor to share with us her thoughts. Particularly, we asked for some of her thoughts on the free speech issue. So when we hear the argument that somehow the unlimited spending of money or corporate money or other forms of undue influence with the use of money in our political system is just a First Amendment free speech right, we can learn a lot about how to respond to that and the free speech implications, corruption implications, democracy implications of failing to address the problem of unlimited money in our political system. So let me give you a bit of background. Professor Torres-Bellasy was here in Cambridge as a Harvard undergrad, then went to Columbia Law School, after which she practiced at Arnold & Porter, one of the nation's top law firms. She then joined the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program as counsel, focused on money in politics and the judiciary, and is now a professor at Stetson University College of Law. She teaches election law, corporate governance, business entities, i.e. corporations, and constitutional law. There are a few more prolific writers and speakers. She is, I don't know how you do it, Chara, but you have created such a volume of work. I can only touch on a few things. Her books, Corporate Citizen, An Argument for the Separation of Corporation and State. Her newest book, Political Brands, is out now. Let us know if you'd like to order a copy if you can't find it, but recommend both very highly. She has so many law review articles that if I listed them all, we'd use up all the time. But let me give you a few that are particularly relevant to us. Deregulating Corporation in the Harvard Law and Policy Review. From a mint on a hotel pillow to an emolument in the Mercer Law Review. Time Suck, How the Fundraising Treadmill Diminishes Effective Governance in the Seton Hall Legislative Journal. Campaign Finance, Free Speech, and Boycotts in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy. Dark Money as a Political Sovereignty Problem. Shooting Your Brand in the Foot, What Citizens United Invites. And The Democracy We Left Behind in Greece, and the McCutcheon Case. One of the, as you can see, she has a knack for good titles, and this is one of my favorites. It's one of the best articles on how we got here and coming out of the Watergate scandal in the mid-1970s, early 1970s. How much is an ambassadorship? A tale of how Watergate led to a strong Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and a weak federal election campaign act. She summed up some of this in an American Constitution Society forum with the title, Citizens United Made My Career and I Wish It Never Happened. So that is some of her work. No one is more thoughtful or more academically rigorous than Professor Torres Felici, but she also knows the Constitution and law are about society and about the citizenry, and few engage in public dialogue as effectively as she does. So we are so grateful to have you with us this evening, Professor. We had a wonderful time when you moderated the debate we had at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia on some of these issues. We have shared the news of your testimony in Congress just last month, and I know you've testified many times in Congress and state legislatures. So we are very grateful indeed that you took the time to be with all of those of us on this call tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Well, I'm blushing. Thank you for that very generous introduction. I've been working on the issue of money in politics since 2005, and I was asked on this call to debunk some of the claims by one of my co-panelists when I was testifying before Congress last month, Bradley Smith. So Mr. Smith is a former commissioner at the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. He's also a conservative law professor, and he is very bright and but I find somewhat deceptive. So one of Brad Smith's key talking points is that dark money isn't a big problem because only 5% of federal spending is dark. So this 5% number is misleading because it counts all of the spending in federal elections. So all of the money is the denominator, which is why you get such a small number for dark money. But the way I would debunk this way of framing it is that, number one, he has the wrong denominator. I think the fairer denominator is to think about dark money as a subset of independent spending. And when you talk about independent spending or outside spending, then dark money in the 2018 election was roughly 50% of the spending. And what I mean by dark money is money that you can't trace to its original source. So whether that original source is a corporation or a union or a rich individual or lots of rich individuals, you just can't tell where the money really came from. So one sort of sleight of hand that he is doing is he's using the wrong denominator when he says it's only 5%. I think if you use the denominator of outside spending, often the dark money percentage goes way, way up. But you should also realize that Commissioner Smith is not making up that 5% number. If you compare dark money to all of the money that is spent in federal elections, including money that goes through political parties, money that goes to candidates, money that's in super PACs, all of that money, then he's right. And the deception, I think, is that the 5% makes it sound small. So what I do when I am talking about dark money is I talk about the actual aggregate numbers. So since 2008, there has been over $1 billion in dark money. And what's so weird about this is Brad Smith's 5% and my $1 billion is actually the same amount. We are not disagreeing about, I'm not disagreeing about his math, really, and he's not disagreeing with my math. We're just framing this issue in a different way. And so I find when I describe that there's been over $1 billion of dark money, that tends to get people's attention because I think for most people's lived experience, $1 billion is a huge number. Another talking point from Brad Smith is that most of the spending since Citizens United has been through individuals. So this is actually also true. But just because individuals have been such big spenders post-Citizens United, it basically invited our neighborhood billionaires to spend more freely, that doesn't mean that corporations have sat on the sidelines of politics. So as I wrote in my written testimony for the House Judiciary Committee, in the previous presidential election in 2016, the top donor to Jeb Bush's super PAC was a corporation called CV Star & Co. That's a private subsidiary of the Star Companies, which is an insurance firm. CV Star gave the pro-Jeb Bush super PAC Right to Rise $10 million. And other corporations, LLCs, and businesses also gave to the Jeb Bush super PAC. That was how Jeb Bush was able to amass $100 million in funds at the beginning of the run for the 2016 campaign. Now, it ended up that Jeb wasn't the nominee, that Trump, because of all of his free advertising, he could basically get more attention through free media than Jeb Bush could using his super PAC money. But nonetheless, there were lots of corporate donors to that Right to Rise PAC, including a publicly traded company called Next Era Energy, which gave him $1 million. Another snapshot of corporate spending comes from the good people who run Open Secrets. So if you haven't spent some time with Open Secrets, they are a great resource. They track all of the spending in federal elections. And as part of the 10th anniversary of Citizens United, they've put out a lot of useful stats about spending since Citizens United, including that between 2012 and 2018, corporations have given $300 million to super PACs. So if you ever get the argument that, corporations aren't really using their Citizens United rights, I have a good Southern phrase for that, which is hogwash, which I like because you can say it in mixed company and even on NPR if you have to. $300 million for me is not nothing. I mean, it's smaller than some of the spending from the billionaires who have gotten their taste of politics of late. But the idea that corporations have somehow not used their Citizens United rights is, as I said, just hogwash. And another thing is Smith focuses on individual donors as if individual donors were the small donors that, give $27 to Bernie Sanders. The individual donors that I think move politics at a national level are the mega donors. So this is also from Open Secrets. They found that just 10 donors accounted for $1 billion in spending in the decade between Citizens United and now. And one measure of how impactful that outside spending has been is that in 26 congressional races, the outside spending dwarfed the amount that the candidate spent him or herself, which means that, who the public hears is these big spenders and not even the person who is trying to run for office or is trying to run for re-election. I guess another thing Jeff asked me to touch on is the Bloomberg question. So you will probably hear that Bloomberg's failure means that money in politics doesn't work or it doesn't matter anymore. And there were similar arguments when Trump won election. And I guess what I would say to that is Michael Bloomberg is not going away in terms of being a political funder. He has made several statements that he is going to spend through November of 2020, and he is hoping to influence who the next president of the United States is. So for me, that is not a story about money in politics not mattering. It's a story about how when a billionaire runs their own campaign, they are often a party of one. And so while they have a lot of money to get their name out there and to push their own message, if that message doesn't connect with voters, then you see what happened with Bloomberg. He spent an enormous amount of money and saw very little electoral returns except for in American Samoa. But that doesn't mean that he won't have an enormous impact on the 2020 election. And again, he might have an enormous impact on who ultimately becomes the next president. And then I guess I would close with this. A lot of people mischaracterize Buckley versus Valeo, which is the case from the 1970s where the court is looking at the Federal Election Campaign Act and they decide that most of it is constitutional, but that expenditure limits are unconstitutional. Buckley gets characterized in the press as meaning that money is speech, but I think it is incumbent on all of us to say Buckley never said that. It's a much more complicated and nuanced argument that Buckley is talking about. So essentially what the court did in Buckley is they said that, and this is in the 1970s, where you had 3 broadcast channels and a few major newspapers if you wanted to get your message to a national audience. And at the time, that meant very costly TV ads or very costly newspaper ads. And so I think this caricature of money as speech is because if you wanted to communicate with a very dispersed electorate, that meant spending an enormous amount of money in the 1970s. Technology has changed. You can talk to, many people, millions of people online at nearly zero marginal cost. And one of the things I think the jurisprudence hasn't caught up with is that phenomenon. But query whether if you litigated Buckley today, whether it would come out the same way when we have different ways of communicating sort of peer-to-peer that basically didn't exist when that decision was made. So I'll end there, and if there are questions, I'm happy to entertain a few.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This is already very fruitful. This is Kimberly again here, and as usual, the way that we'll field questions is if you have a question, press 1 on your keypad so that I see you raising your hand and I'll know to call on you. And if you have a question in mind, know that other people now or after the call will also have the question. They might not have the chance to ask it, so and for everyone's benefit, please ask questions. Awesome, and I see we've already got some. Anne and company, y'all are off mute. If you could let everyone know where you're calling in from and what your question is.
Dallas, Texas, the 32nd Congressional District. My question is, how do we talk about dark money in the context of the 28th Amendment? Because it's my understanding that this court in Citizens United explicitly said that it approves of disclosure. and that Congress actually has the ability to require disclosure without the necessity of amending the Constitution. So how do we talk about dark money as part of the problem that we need a constitutional amendment to solve?
So that is correct. I think one of the ways that Citizens United gets misread, especially by the general public, is people see that there was this decision called Citizens United that people were angry about, and then there was $1 billion of dark money, and people blame Citizens United for that dark money, and that is inaccurate. As you said, the Supreme Court in Citizens United upheld disclosure as being perfectly constitutional, and then a few years later in the McCutcheon case, they did it again. They upheld disclosure as being perfectly constitutional. So I guess I would say that dark money is one of the ways that people get excited or angry about our current campaign finance system. It is correct that you don't actually need a constitutional amendment to get rid of dark money. You would just need some changes in statutory law and some clarifications at the Federal Election Commission. But I think because people are incensed by dark money, it can just be part of the conversation for why our campaign finance system is broken right now.
Chara, can I ask?
Yeah, please add in, please.
Follow up on that. No, it's a follow up to you, related to it though, and I wonder what your thoughts are on sort of the relationship of the various ways Citizens United and related cases made it difficult to regulate certain entities or any entities, and how that may have facilitated dark money because the court has made it unconstitutional to limit certain entities' spending. So that's sort of a question about how dark money moves. But then apart from dark money, which as you both you and Brad Smith say is a relatively lesser proportion of all of the money in the system, what are some of the First Amendment implications? And I don't mean to limit money as a First Amendment implication, but the sources of the billions of dollars that come into the system being concentrated among so few of the percentage of Americans, and whether and how that implicates other First Amendment principles, not just the anti-regulatory principle, but the principles like political equality or corruption and so on.
Sure. So dark money is typically created by routing political spending through opaque nonprofits. Typically that is 501c4s, which are social welfare organizations, and 501c6s, which are trade associations. And once that money goes through those opaque nonprofits, the public really cannot tell, no matter how much due diligence they do, where the money really came from. So, for example, you'll see money that goes through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is a trade association, but you can't tell which corporation was the real source of that funding. And there has been this hesitance by the IRS, which has a role to play here as a regulator in dealing with political nonprofits. You know, essentially, if the IRS were doing its job, they would pull the nonprofit status of some of these C4s and C6s because they are not supposed to be primarily interfering, that's my word, they're not supposed to do intervention in partisan elections, and a lot of these C4s and C6s, nearly, 99% of what they do all day is politics, so they shouldn't have this nonprofit status. But the IRS has been very gun-shy post Citizens United. I mean, part of that has been Republican members of Congress basically came down on the IRS like a load of bricks when they tried to regulate some of these political nonprofits, especially Tea Party groups. And the IRS got the message and they backed way off. Another thing that happened is there was a push at the Securities and Exchange Commission, which regulates publicly traded companies, to get the SEC to promulgate a rule that would end dark money at publicly traded corporations. Well, that got the attention of Mitch McConnell, who's the majority leader in the Senate. And what he has been doing year after year after year is he's been adding policy writers to the U.S. budget. And the policy writers say to the Securities and Exchange Commission, you can't write a dark money rule. And it goes completely unnoticed in most areas because it's part of the budget. The budget has a lot of things going on in it, and people just don't pay attention to like the fine print that says to the SEC, you can't stop dark money from publicly traded corporations. Now, in terms of the First Amendment values, this is the tough one, I think. Because of Buckley versus Vallejo, the court has, I think, and Citizens United, in my mind, they have painted themselves into a corner. And I feel like at some point, something's going to give, because what they have essentially said is they are privileging wealth, and they are giving a bigger platform to the uber wealthy to influence politics. Now, I think what might be very interesting if the 2020 election actually has even more Bloomberg spending than what we've seen him spend on himself. I wonder whether that might get the attention of the conservative majority on the Supreme Court, because most of the large political spending that has happened post-Citizens United has been heavily skewed to the right. And obviously the justices are not just politicians in robes, but they also have pretty well-known political biases. And so I wonder whether they might have like a little moment of clarity as they watch Bloomberg spend on the Democratic side in a way that changes who is president, whether they might actually rethink some of their positions. And one of the people who might move is Chief Justice Roberts. And we've already seen him do that in a case called Williams-Yulee versus the Florida Bar. And in that case, Chief Justice Roberts ends up on the side of the liberal justices, and he upholds a rule that Florida has which prevents judicial candidates from directly soliciting campaign funds. And he does this in the name of the integrity of the judiciary, but it does show that there is at least some glimmer of thought in there with the Chief Justice that if you just read Citizens United, you wouldn't predict that Chief Justice Roberts would have sided with the liberals in that Florida Bar case. So I think there could be some movement, and it may come from unexpected places.
Yeah. We have a lot of hands up, so I'm going to kick it back to Kimberly.
Sure thing. Next up, Judy Butler, you're off mute if you want to let everyone know where you're calling in from and what your question is.
Yeah, hi. I'm calling from Wilmington, Delaware. I just, when we say that corporations may not be putting so much money in as was anticipated, it seems to me that these 10 ultra-wealthy families that are pouring money in are connected to these corporations. I mean, the Koch brothers clearly have a big stake, financially certainly, in the whole hydrocarbon extraction industries. So to me, it's a question in my mind of just where the money does come from for these, again, ultra-wealthy individuals who poured $1 billion in just the 10 families.
Yeah. So campaign finance law cares an enormous amount, or at least it used to, about whether the money comes from your personal pocket as an individual or whether it comes from a corporation's coffers. And there is still a federal law on the books that was not touched by Citizens United called the Tillman Act. The Tillman Act prevents corporations from giving direct donations to federal candidates, and that is still good law. But that's something to keep your eye on, because the James Bopps of the world, who's the attorney who brought the Citizens United case originally, he keeps on challenging state laws that ban corporations from giving to state candidates, which is the state analog to the federal Tillman Act. And sort of interestingly, so far, the Supreme Court has basically said, we're not hearing these cases. There have been cert deny, cert deny, cert deny. But eventually, they're going to take either a Tillman Act case, which is the federal law, or one of these state cases, because about half of the states still ban corporations from giving directly to candidates. So, I mean, one thing to keep your eye on is when that happens, and I think inevitably this Supreme Court will do the wrong thing. Who knows? Well, prognostication is not my strong suit. But if they actually get rid of the Tillman Act, which goes back to 1907, I think that's just another opportunity to educate the public about why you actually need a constitutional amendment to deal with all of this, because the court is just sort of, I think it's departed from where the average American person is when they think about money in politics.
Thanks so much. And perhaps for our last question, I'm going to share a question that's been submitted to me via message. And the question is, it seems that there are two separate ideas, one that money is speech, another that corporations are people. Would an amendment that only tackled, or if we only tackled the idea that money is speech, would that be effective with the thinking that corporations are important, they create jobs, they do have laws that solely affect them? Would it be possible and better to solve the problem by addressing only the idea that money is speech and not the idea that corporations are people?
Okay. So a critique of Citizens United is that it makes three fundamental mistakes, that a corporation is a person, that money is speech, and that an election is a marketplace. Now, the issue of corporate personhood is probably bigger than we can deal with in one question at the end of the night today. But corporate personhood is a concept in Anglo-American law that is older than the United States. It's a concept that actually came from Europe and was incorporated by early Supreme Courts almost from the very founding of the nation. So on the one hand, it's almost as if tackling the corporations are people part of it is harder because it's more entwined in American jurisprudence. I mean, one way to think about campaign finance and the money is speech ruse is that is really a product of the Supreme Court in the 1970s with Buckley versus Vallejo and another case called Virginia Pharmacy. So that concept is a lot, I think, less heavily intertwined with the way that the Supreme Court thinks about the role of either money in politics or the role of corporations in our economy. And so, on the one hand, if you're going for the amendment, I would definitely try for putting in language that limits the statutory rights that Congress can grant to a corporation, but I might warn you off of tackling the bigger concept of a corporation being a person, because that concept, as I said before, is older than the United States. And I'll end it there. And I want to thank you so much for having me on today.
Well,
thank you so much for joining us.
We're so glad you could
Okay,
join
thank
us.
you. Have a good rest
Take
of your
care.
call. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Good night.
And Jeff, do you have any final words to share before we move on to the next part of the call?
No, I'll be on though if you need me.
Sounds good. Wow, very fruitful discussion. And I will move from here to kick it back and share my gratitude for all of you guys on the call and all the work that you are doing in your states. As we do each month, we'll review how that work is adding up toward our national goals. Our ultimate goal, of course, is a constitutional amendment, which will require proposal and ratification. An amendment can be proposed by either 34 states calling for a constitutional convention or 2/3 of Congress passing a bill. Right now, 5 states have called for a convention, and in Congress, 42 of 67 senators and 212 of 290 representatives co-sponsor bills that propose this amendment. The second necessary step is ratification by 38 states, or 3/4 of states. In addition to the 5 states calling for a convention, another 15 has passed resolutions calling on Congress for this amendment. So we're at 20 of 30 states that are ready to ratify. For now, I know that many of you, the work you are doing in your states is to make your state the 21st, so it's a race. It's on. And in pursuit of those goals and in general to continue adding to these numbers, our job is to make it good politics for even more elected officials to support this amendment. We do that by first writing media that raises awareness in our community, then holding outreach events to collect support from our communities, and then finally having meetings with our elected officials where we bring our letters, our signs of support to make the case that it is good politics to support this amendment. And then we go back to the beginning and actually make it good politics by writing media pieces and holding community events where we tell our neighbors about the status of those discussions with our elected officials. So far this year, we've published 34 media pieces, held 20 community outreach events, and met with 52 elected officials. Credit to many people for contributing to these numbers in the last month, including Deborah Helper in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Rick Lass in Southwest New Mexico, Linda Smith and Ellen Green Bush in Port Clinton, Ohio, Ted Kanapke in Columbus, Ohio, David Stringfellow and Ann Drum in North Texas. And in Tucson, Arizona, our latest chapter's first tabling event was a real team effort, so credit to Wendy Anderson, Sharon Falk, Maury Reed, and Greg Falk for all contributing to that success. Also, in executing these actions, in the last month, people came up with some great ideas, and I wanted to share some of those in a little more detail for everyone's sake. First off, in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, a group of 3 American Promise advocates led by Carol Ortenzo met with Representative Guy Rushenthaler's office. It's U.S. Representative Guy Rushenthaler's office, and they were able to start off the meeting by telling the aide, "We represent the Republican, Democratic, and Independent parties," and then proceed to a very effective discussion that moved Representative Rushenthaler up the champion scale. So again, that great idea of having bringing a cross-partisan group to your meeting and letting them know that. Next up, in Delaware, Judy Butler had 3 written media pieces published and, together with Hayes Butler, spoke on the Del-Aware radio show, all to discuss the Delaware chapter's work to pass a new state resolution in Delaware. Delaware is one of the 20 states that has passed a resolution. Our Delaware chapter is working to pass a new one. And I'm so excited to see one of our chapters ahead of the game on this very idea that we wanted to share with everyone, which is even if your state has already passed a resolution, that exciting work doesn't need to be over. In the interest of keeping your state ready to ratify, you could pursue a resolution in every legislative session, and it would be impactful every time. So great work, Judy and Hayes Butler and the whole Delaware chapter. And finally, a great segue into our discussion of the action of the month in the American Promise Pledge. In West Metro, Minnesota, Sally and Jay Johnson tabled and really worked the crowd at a caucusing event in order to advertise their upcoming American Promise Pledge event. The Pledge event will bring together West Metro City Council candidates, incumbents, constituents, and local press with the goal of convincing City Council candidates to sign the pledge and also raise their awareness about template local resolutions that we have. And I love this idea that flips our usual model of approaching elected officials with the pledge and instead incentivizes them to come to us with the chance to appear at a public event where constituents and press will also be in attendance. So to everyone who's been part of these great actions in the last month, fantastic work. And as I say, that last victory in particular is a great segue into our final portion of the call, a combined grassroots victory and training with Ashwari Solo Hub. Our action of the month is to get elected officials and candidates, or perhaps a few of both, to sign the American Promise Pledge. Ashwari has led the work of our Santa Fe, New Mexico chapter to collect pledge signatures and has 8 pledge signatures in just this election cycle to show for it. So she's joining us tonight to share a practical behind-the-scenes look at the blood, sweat, and tears that go into getting a pledge signature. And you'll all have the opportunity to ask her any questions you have as you think about going out and doing the same. And with that, Ashwari, I'm going to take you off mute. Take it away, Ashwari.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thanks for having me. I'm really happy to share what we're doing here in New Mexico with the pledge. Back in early 2018, we made a plan with the pledge that actually didn't pan out very well, but it was a really good start. So we researched who the candidates were, and then members of our APA chose certain candidates to go after, inviting them to sign the pledge. There were, of course, a lot more candidates than we could personally approach, so we also sent out a mass email to the rest. One of our volunteers set up a Google Sheets tracking spreadsheet listing all the candidates and tracking who was approaching who. This has turned out to be really helpful, and we do continue to use the spreadsheet to track our pledge activity. Disappointingly, though, there was 0 response to our mass email. And even harder to swallow, we didn't have a lot of success with our targeted attempts with specific candidates either. But we did learn something. What success we did have seemed to be really in close relation to how much follow-up we did. So that's the blood, sweat, and tears piece, follow up. So what was more successful, though, were the situations where a volunteer already had some kind of connection to or relationship with a candidate or elected official, and then used that connection to approach that person. This also takes a lot of follow-up, but the results are typically much, much better. So the very best thing to do is take advantage of existing connections. Anyone who already has that kind of a connection should reach out to that person, the candidate or elected official. Introduce the topic of the 28th Amendment. Explore the idea of their taking the pledge. I would encourage people to take your time with this. There's really no need to rush. And, you know, you can think about it. Every time you go back and forth talking about the amendment or, you know, talking about the pledge, you're relationship building. You're building that relationship. So whether they ever sign the pledge or not, you know, you can always know that you're building that relationship. So over time, we did discover a few things that really do work pretty well, especially when there's not already a relationship, when you're kind of cold calling. Number 1, be prepared. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Number 2, show up where candidates and elected officials are. This could be candidate forums, campaign events, town halls, office openings, all kinds of things. And number 3, of course, follow up. So in the category of being prepared, become familiar with the pledge. Read it over until you know what it contains. It's pretty simple, but read it and then be able to tell a potential signer why they should sign. You could customize this to the person you're approaching, or you can use it something like, there's a statement right on the American Promise website that I like. It says, quote, polling shows that voters want candidates who will help fix our broken elections and return representation to the people. And we want to help spread the word that you are a reformer, end quote. So most people respond positively to that. Another element of being prepared is to always carry a color copy of the pledge, even if it's folded up in your purse or a briefcase or backpack. You never know when you might meet up with a candidate or elected official. What happened to me is I once met U.S. Representative Ben Ray Lujan in the airport. We were waiting for the same plane. But unfortunately, I had done a great job of emptying my purse of non-essential items, so I didn't have a pledge with me. I really wished that I did. Another thing to carry is a color copy of one of the graphics from the American Promise website, or better yet, know how to bring it up on your phone. They're beautiful. They're really impressive, and most people respond positively to those, to that visual. You know, in a way, potential signers get a chance to see what's in it for them with that graphic, because most candidates are likely to be interested in free publicity. So practice getting to the graphics on your phone, just going into the website, and maybe Kimberly, you can put a link in the recap to this call, but practice that so that you can do it real easily when you run into somebody. You might want to also point out one of the pledge signers' graphics who would impress your particular person you're talking to. Of course, best of all would be one of their opponents if they are a candidate, somebody who's already signed. So the preferred way, I think, to approach a potential signer is to, wherever you meet the candidate, get them to sign the pledge right then. That's why you need to have the paper copy with you. If there are a lot of people and the candidate is trying to cover ground, like they say it's some kind of an event, you might choose to talk instead to a campaign or staff person. In fact, that might be the best approach, because candidates often defer to their campaign manager for this kind of decision. I'll tell you another little story. When I met Representative Deb Haaland at a campaign event in Albuquerque, she was busy working the room, so I found her campaign manager and told him about the pledge. He looked it over, and then he called headquarters. I'm not sure exactly who that was, but after getting approval from headquarters, he introduced me to the candidate, gave her the pledge, and told her it had been approved. Well, she looked it over and signed it. So I didn't have to do anything. I gave my phone number, I gave my phone to the campaign manager, and he took several pictures on it. So, of course, once you get a pledge signed, do try to get photos. Those are really good to have. And definitely get the name of a contact person along with their email, maybe their phone number, so you can follow up. This is really important. And also, another important thing, offer to take the pledge and submit it to American Promise for them. This is a good practice for several reasons. One, it gives us a chance to make sure everything gets to American Promise properly. Two, we have opportunities to do follow-up, which of course is great for relationship building. And three, we can help them fulfill their pledge by contacting them later when we hear about appropriate actions they can take. I mean, that's a huge area. But so after I get home with a signed pledge, there are several things I do. First, I scan the pledge or take a photo of it, send it to American Promise. That way they know we have a new signer and they can add it to the list. Then I go about gathering everything needed for the graphic. In addition to the pledge, they need to have a photo and a quote. Usually, there won't be time for the pledge signer to give you a quote when they sign the pledge. Most people are going to want to think about that a little bit. But this is where you can use the contact person you got at the signing. And maybe, many times that's not going to be the actual candidate or elected official. It's going to be staff. So send that person an email thanking the candidate for taking the pledge. Really important, attach a scan or photo of the signed pledge to refresh their memory so they know what you're referring to. Tell them about the graphics that American Promise makes, how they feature new signers on their website and Facebook page. Again, that's publicity. Include a link to that slideshow with the graphics and point out a signer who will impress them, especially if one of their opponents has signed. Tell them they can look at some of the quotes on existing graphics if they need to get an idea for what kind of quote they'd like to send. You can also send them, when you do that email, you can send them the pictures that you took at the signing and ask if those are okay or whether they'd maybe like to send you an official photo. Obviously, invite them to contact you for any information they might need or questions they might have. Following up with this part is really important. They might not get back to you right away. You know, you send an email, they might not get back, but if this happens, don't worry. Keep following up. Actually, that can be a great way to stay on their radar, being friendly and informative. You know, every time you write, asking whether they've had a chance to think about a quote, you can give another gentle reminder about why this work is so important, how glad you are that they are on board, and how you look forward to working with them as future opportunities for action develop. So after you get their quote and decide, you know, what photo to use, submit all that to American Promise. Jessica Kellner creates the graphics, I think, and Mark Steininger gets them onto the website. And then once you submit that, you keep checking the website to see when the graphic shows up, and then once it does, you want to alert the candidate and any staff members you've been in contact with, and include a link to the graphics page so that they can see what it looks like. Again, another opportunity to talk up the movement and say how glad you are that they're on board. So that's the first best way to get a pledge signed. I think the next best way is if a potential, you know, you might have a potential pledge signer who's interested, but they're not really ready to sign. So you can give them a hard copy of the pledge to take with them. If you do this, remember to give them your contact information so that they can contact you if they have questions. And let them know that after they sign the pledge, they can either submit it directly to American Promise or, preferred, they can send it to you and you will submit it for them. Again, the reason you want to do this is so you can follow up, making sure they get a graphic made and also having those valuable future contacts for relationship building. I think that leaving a pledge with someone is not ideal because it's easy for that pledge to get lost or forgotten, but it's far better than having them walk away empty-handed. So if you do give out a pledge, make sure that you make a note about who you gave the pledge to and when. Get their contact information so you can follow up. Okay, follow up. Watch the American Promise website for a few days. If you see them show up as a signer, fabulous. Follow up with a thank you. But if not, reach out to them, remind them of the pledge. You can offer to send it to them again and keep following up. Sometimes if the contact is brief or if, God forbid, I don't have a pledge with me, I'll just exchange contact information with the person after I've told them about the pledge. If there's time, I can show them the pledge on my phone. It's also easy to download. You just might want to practice that too. And so then, you know, I make a note. I try to get back to them as soon as I can and proceed with the request. And I have had it happen where I will do that and then even eventually meet that person to get the pledge signed. Of course, you know, any candidate or elected official can sign the pledge on their own. They can just go to the website. But again, I prefer to help them. We want to know who our pledge signers are. We want to begin developing a relationship with them, you know, on the basis of them pledging. And we want to assist them and collaborate in actually moving forward and taking actions in support of the 28th Amendment. Once they're supporters and connected with American Promise, they might even want to help get involved in recruiting other pledge signers. I actually have had this happen. Or obtaining co-sponsors for bills. There's no end to the things pledge signers can do to take the movement forward. I mean, the pledge itself states, I support and I pledge to use my office to advance the 28th Amendment. Well, we want to help them keep that pledge. Not only sign it, we really want to help them, you know, do what they're signing. Once a candidate has taken a pledge, you want to consider approaching that person's opponents and asking them to sign. A large part of the purpose for this pledge drive is to make the amendment a hot topic, to get candidates thinking and talking about the problem. We want the topic to be widely discussed and debated by candidates, and we want candidates to let voters know where they stand so they can vote accordingly. So, simple recap, be prepared, know the pledge, keep a copy with you, and practice bringing it up on your phone. Number 2, in addition to reaching out to candidates and elected officials you already have some contact or connection with, make it a point to be where candidates and elected officials are. And of course, number 3, my favorite of all, follow up. Keep following up. And don't forget, once you get someone to sign the pledge, the opportunity exists for continuing to build that relationship, moving them up the champion scale, hopefully from a supporter to an advocate to a leader to a champion. So thanks. That's what I have.
Thank you. Follow up. It's the name of the game, and I love that attitude of welcoming the chance. You know, when candidates or elected officials are not getting back to you, using that as an opportunity to share another impactful line. It's something I struggle with. We have so many key data points. I can't get them all in one conversation. We do, in the last 4 minutes, I think, you know, with such a thorough covering of the topic, Ishwari probably proactively addressed a lot of questions, but I trust that you guys can come up with some more, and you'll have an opportunity in the last 3 minutes of our call if you've got a question. Ooh, awesome. And I see Nancy Morgan. You have your hand up. Nancy, you're off mute. Where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
Hi, everybody. This is Nancy Morgan from Northern Virginia. Ishwari, that was wonderful. You really energized me in terms of, you know, getting back out, because I've had very difficult experiences, and a lot of it is, especially between elected officials and candidates, you'll get more candidates who are interested in Virginia. I guess they've been told they shouldn't sign pledges, so it's really difficult to get them to do that. How do you get them to do that? And then the question for Kimberly, in terms of the website, I got a couple pledges signed, but I got the visual graphic that I sent to the candidate, but I never saw it on the website. I click on their name and you couldn't click on it, so that was just a question about the website and how to promote that back to the candidate.
Thank you,
well, I can talk. I can talk
Yeah.
for just a minute about the no pledge policies. A lot of candidates, or mostly elected officials, don't sign pledges. They just don't. And if they tell you that, then don't try to get them to sign the pledge. It's just not worth pushing and becoming creating an adversarial situation. What I would suggest, if you find out from a person, a candidate or an elected official, that they just don't sign pledges for whatever reason, move to the next place. Say, okay, well then, so it seems like you do support this. You don't want to sign the pledge. How can we help you do the things that the pledge would say? That, is there any, can we get back with you when we have something, that we want you to do? And that's just a way to keep that relationship going, and they're not going to sign the pledge. Don't spend a lot of energy trying to make them do it.
And I will very quickly address the web question. If you go to americanpromise.net/pledge, or the pledge part of the website, there is a rolling graphic that goes through the different graphics one by one, but I will absolutely forward that idea to our webmaster, Mark, that we add a link by the candidates' names, or maybe make the candidates' names a link. And in the last 60 seconds, David Stringfellow, you are off mute. If you could let everyone know where you're calling in from and what your question is.
Yes, I'm calling from a North Texas suburb of Dallas, Plano. Two things that are related. What a fantastic overview. Thank you so much for that, Ishwari. It's really encouraging. Sure. I would add one thing I found works well as there's a trifold piece that you can purchase in the store at American Promise. And when I meet with officials, I come equipped with that as well. As a matter of fact, In one case, I handed the flyer to the official, and he read the first page and said, "Where do I sign?" So I did not expect that, but it just helps promote the conversation, I find, and it's really well done. And then one other thing, I wanted to give a shout out to Mark Steininger. We had 3 people here in North Texas sign the pledge the day before Super Tuesday. And Mark and whoever was involved, they were able to turn those pledges around in less than a day and get them out to the candidates. And I just really appreciated that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, and thank you for the work that you did to get those signatures in the first place, and thank you, Ashwari, for sharing this great, inspiring information and answering questions, and thank you to everyone. I'm going to take us off mute so we can all celebrate the work that we have done and are about to do to go out and collect pledge signatures. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you have a good night.